Well, here we are, still out in the desert, just come out of the sand dunes. I'm on a rocky plateau, and what I'm trying to do is see if I can spot some stars that'll help me get from A to B. If I look a bit nervous, it's because ever since I got here and the sun went down, there's been a donkey that keeps sneaking up behind me and going, "Oh!" It unnerves you a little bit till you get used to it. Anyway, the stars. I don't know a lot about the stars, but there are three main pointer stars if you want to use for navigation to start you off with. So we've got in the northern hemisphere, we've got the North Star. In the southern hemisphere, we've got the Southern Cross, which is a combination of stars which all form to make a marker pointing you to where south is. And settled above the equator, so I should be able to see this tonight, is the Orion. Orion's belt is what I'm looking for, because there's three pointer stars underneath that will point to roughly south. Now, I've got my compass with me. I've had a look to see where south actually is, and now I'm going to see if I can find those stars to help me navigate. Now, okay, it's easy to follow south, but by watching the stars move around, I should be able to go east, west, whatever, as long as I keep them in the right place. So we'll have a look and we'll see what we can see up there. We do have the moon, which I have mentioned in a previous video, that will give you a rough direction to south, but I'll mention that again shortly. Right, let's get up and have a look around and see what we can find for you. Oh. Bloody donkey. Well, the star gazing is going okay. The star filming is going absolutely nowhere. I haven't got the best equipment, and what equipment I've got, I don't really know how to use it to its best advantage. I have got stars, and I do have Orion's belt right above me with its two pointer stars, and I've checked on the compass and it is pointing exactly where my compass says south is. The moon, and this is where the problem is, the moon is a 3/4 moon and it's right above my head, and it's making it very difficult to see as many stars as I would like. So what I'm going to do is, I've got 20 minutes left before somebody comes to pick me up. I don't want to stay out here too long because all my friends are sitting round a bar drinking cold beers, and I'm out here on the edge of the desert failing miserably at the task I set myself. But anyway, I'm going to use that 20 minutes to sit back and enjoy the night sky, and then we'll have a look at a later time at some other pictures and everything where I can explain what we're trying to do. Ooh. Well, we haven't got a lot to show you, but after I laid back to look at the stars for the last 20 minutes, I did manage to get one picture. It's handheld, so everything's a little bit fuzzy, but we have got the Orion's belt, and that's made up of the 4 stars here, 1, 2, 3, 4, and this line of 3 is Orion's belt, and then you've got 3 marker stars here, and I say marker stars because these are the 3 here that are pointing to south, and when it's directly overhead, that's when you get the best result. This is virtually overhead. You don't get as accurate a reading if it's over to the west or if it's over to the east over here. So, well, because it's coming through at an angle like that, the more the angle, the less accurate the position of where south is, but it's near enough if you just wanted to head roughly south. So there we have it, Orion's belt, something to aid you finding your direction. Once you know where south is, of course, you can then head east, west, north, whatever direction you want, as long as you keep this constellation in the right position. The other thing I mentioned was the moon, and we'll have just a quick look now at a little clip from a previous video which will show you how the moon can aid you. So there we have the moon. At the moment it will give us a good indication of which way is south. If you look at the highest point on the crescent on the right hand side and draw a line down to the bottom of the crescent, if you were to carry on that line all the way down until it touched the horizon, that point would be roughly south. Right, now we'll take a look at the Southern Cross. Now the Southern Cross we can't see from where we are. We're sitting at about 16 degrees, I think it is, north of the equator, and generally speaking you can only see this in the south of the equator. You can see it every day all year if you're as far south as 34 degrees. You're supposed to be able to see it in winter and spring just north of the equator, but we aren't going to get to see it because we're just too far north and the light conditions wouldn't be good enough anyway. But what we're looking at here is, this is the Milky Way, and that's nothing to do with chocolate, and we've got these 4 stars here. There's actually 5, there's a small one there, and they form, if you draw a line that way and then that way across, hence the term Southern Cross. And this little star here helps you identify which way up it is and what you're looking at. Now to find south, what we do is we draw a line through there and we take it across here, and then you've got 2 little stars here, Alpha Centauri and Beta Centauri. You draw a line between them and draw a line upwards, and where these 2 lines cross, in this case it would be about there, you then bring a line down and this line points to south. Simple, isn't it? Yeah, simple if you can see the damn thing. There's also, making it easier to spot if the sky is really clear, is this section of the Milky Way. It has what's known as a dark area here, nebula is the term they use. Don't ask me what a nebula is, I haven't got a clue. But anyway, there should be a dark patch here in the line of the Milky Way to help you focus in on where the Southern Cross is. Anyway, there we have it, and if we ever get into the Southern Hemisphere to do any of this, hopefully I'll be able to find it. So far I haven't mentioned anything about food, and there's a reason for that. If you're going to find yourself stuck in the desert and short of water, the last thing you want to do is eating. Eating uses up a lot of moisture to process the food in your body, so you can go for quite a while without food without it being detrimental to your well-being. Obviously if you go too long it's not going to be good for you, but in the interest of preserving your water, don't bother eating. If you've got lots of water, eat normally and keep putting the calories in, but if not, don't. You may get lucky when you're wandering around in desert areas. You may find a palm tree like this, and this has got some young fruit on it, young coconuts, which will take quite a while to ripen up. But if they're more than 6 to 8 months old, they should contain water, and not very much in the way of what you imagine with coconuts, with the brown airy shell and then the hard interior coconut meat. But something like this, the ones on here are a little bit small, but if we could find a bigger one, we should be able to get some water out of it. So we'll give that a go and see if that'll help sustain us on our travels out of the desert. Another thing that might be useful off this tree is the bark here that's peeling off. This is like a fine mesh material, very difficult to pull apart. But if you can cut this off and collect a bit of it, it would work quite nice as tinder. Now if we're lucky, as we start coming out of this desert, we may find some undergrowth plants, shrubs. And this is good because it's going to help us in one or two ways. It's going to give us some shelter, and we just might be able to get some water as well. The trees around this area are predominantly palm, and I'm probably going to pronounce this wrong. We might call it acacia tree, or actually a tree. Either way, they're found all over the world in a lot of different species. This one, I'm not sure what it is, what species, what the exact name of it is. They tend to have very, very sharp thorns on them, so you've got to be careful how you handle them. But if you find one of these trees, don't assume that if you dig down you're going to find some water, because these trees don't need rainfall as such. They take the water from deep in the ground. It goes down meters and meters and meters until the roots find what they're looking for. So a very hardy tree, and we're going to see if we can get some water out of it over the next few hours, and if we do, well, all well and good, and if we don't, as I said earlier, we're going to die. Yeah, okay. Well, we'll crack on with that and see where we get from there. What I've done is, with that bit of plastic we had to try and make a solar still in the desert, which wasn't big enough, it's still not big enough for this job, but I've wrapped it around all these green branches, as many as I can, and tried to seal it, and I'm hoping that it'll draw water from the roots through the leaves and collect in my plastic here. We'll come back later and see if we've had any success. I've got my bark off the palm tree here, and the one thing to bear in mind is that deserts can get very cold in the night. So if you've got some materials and you've got a way of making fire, you may need that. So I'm going to have a go with this. I've never tried this before, so I don't know what's going to happen. But I've basically ripped it apart, this, and scrunched it up into lots of finer pieces. Now obviously if I was going to do this for real and it did take, I'd have some small twigs. There's quite a lot of dry twigs like this that I could shave up into a fire stick and get the fire going. But first we want to see if we can actually get a flame from this. And as I said, I've never tried this before, so let's have a look and see. Just hope my battery on the camera doesn't run out in the time it takes me to do this. Got a little bit of a breeze coming in, which I'm trying to shelter from. But well, I definitely had a flame there. I just maybe need to scrunch it up a little bit more. It came apart as the flame took. So I'm not having any luck with the flint and steel. I'm getting I'm getting sparks, I'm getting little burning embers. I don't know if it's the wind that's blowing it out, but just to check whether this stuff does burn and I'm not flogging a dead horse, because I'm limited on time today, I'm going to just see whether it'll burn. Oh, ooh, bloody hell. Ah, ooh, ah. Oh yeah, well that sort of burned. Burnt me, in fact. Yeah. Well, you can see if you're using some matches, that takes quite easily. There's ember glowing there that you can see. Maybe need a little bit more work, preparation or something, but yeah, so I think if you got some way of igniting it, this would make quite good tinder. Right, let's go do something. Let's go do something safer. Now, we've mentioned about hygiene earlier on, and the problem is if you're out in the desert, you don't want to be using your water to clean yourself, but you need to keep yourself clean. And it may sound ridiculous, but one way of doing this is to use the sand, washing the sand. Muslim people, they have a special procedure to go through when they're washing their hands. I don't know it all the way through, but they start off by tapping the ground with their hands, and then they rub them together, and you've got to do everything in the right order. Me, fortunately, I'm not a Muslim, so I'm able to just do any old hand. So this stuff is great for taking the oil and grease off your hands. Now, you do obviously want some oil and grease in your hands, but eventually it's going to cause you problems if it's all left on your skin. Sweat, dried sweat, salt. So you think, okay, cleanse your hands. What about, well, you can do the whole body. So, you know, I can get this and I can and brush that off, and we're going to have a nice clean face, and we still have all our water left to use. It's not something I'd be doing at home every day, but out here it does the job. Now, I will say one thing: you keep seeing me just sitting down willy-nilly in the sand. Well, in certain places it's best to be aware of what there is that's living out there, because I will tell you a couple of stories that I got. Well, I say stories, one was a story and one was an actual practical demonstration. I was out in the Namib desert with a guide, ex-tracker for the military, and he was very knowledgeable about tracking and the environment. And as we walked through the desert, and he was explaining different things about different plants, and he said there's a lot of life under the sand. And we said, yeah. And he said, take a look down there. He said, what do you see? I said, nothing, sand. And he said, look at the grains here, how the grains are slightly different. And he said, there's a scorpion below there. He said, so you've got to think about this before you sit down. And I thought, yeah, like hell there is. Anyway, he put his hand in the sand very quickly, like that, flicked it up, and scorpion came out. I was absolutely amazed. And that is what I would call tracking to the finest degree. We're just going to have a look at a little bit about the navigation now. You might note I'm getting a little bit croaky. I didn't bring anything to drink with me, and I don't feel thirsty, but your body can lose 1 to 2% of its water content before thirst kicks in, and you can become dehydrated basically before you become thirsty. So I've got to be careful with that. Back to the navigation. Normally I'd be using the compass. This is a global compass. If you bring a compass from the northern hemisphere into the southern hemisphere, it won't work. The needle, the further round the globe you go, the magnet is on the end and it wants to lean towards the magnetic pole, hence pushing it down and catching on the compass housing. With a global compass, it will work in both hemispheres, because what they do, I'll bring it over there a little bit, they put the magnet into the centre here, and it's on some sort of gimbal, so the needle is acting independently to the magnet, and that way it works in both hemispheres. It's not pushing down or pushing up, it's sat level. But of course, we may not have a compass, because flipping Dippy Clark here has gone and flipping left it at home by mistake, which is not unusual. So what we can use is the sun. Now you will see a lot of people on YouTube, on the internet, showing you how to make a sun compass, but I've tried this the way somebody showed me on YouTube, and it works perfectly in my latitude at home, and I assume it works perfectly in theirs because they're in Central America and I was in more or less in line with them on the same latitude. But it isn't going to work just sticking a pin in and going, right, at 10 o'clock if I rotate that to the shadow, that's going to be north. As soon as you start moving further and further south and into the southern hemisphere, you're going to get different time zones and sun comes up at different times. So anyway, won't go into details about that. We'll just tell you how I do it. So before I go anywhere, and this is in the UK or anywhere abroad, wherever I'm going to be, I have a look at the times of sunrise and sunset, and the same for the moon as it happens. And so here is sunrise is at 99 degrees at just before 7, and sunset is around the same time in the evening. And then I look at all the other times for each hour and see how many degrees the sun moves each hour. So around here, I don't need to know it exactly, but around here it's going to be 2 or 3 degrees in the first hour, move another 5 or 6 degrees in the next hour, then it'll be 10 degrees, and then we'll get up to about 12 o'clock and it'll be jumping in big jumps about 22 degrees to 33 degrees, then it'll start coming down again. I've got those figures roughly in the back of my head. So, but in this particular case, and in most cases, I usually write them down. Now, what I've got here, should have brought some water with me. Stupid, really. What I've got here is a little compass thing there. But if you've got a notebook and pencil, you can just draw one up like that, you know, just very quickly. I think I've got one or two here somewhere. Yeah, there we go. I mean, that's divided up into 15 degree segments. But I'm going to use this one just to show you. Now, because I've got it wrote down, I know that the time now is just gone 8:30 in the morning. The sun came up at 7 o'clock, and according to my list here, it will have moved 4 degrees up until 8, and when it gets to 9, it'll have moved another 6. So it's only half an hour, so by now it'll have moved 3. So altogether it'll have moved 7 degrees. So 99 plus 7, 106 degrees. So let's have a look at this shadow. So we'll put that in there. We'll line 106 degrees up. So that's 90 east. Bring it round to there. Just guess, 190, okay. And then we're going to line the shadow up so it goes straight through the centre. Now that should be, and I'm going to pin that in there to stop it blowing away, that now should be north. So we'll check that, it says. Wondering where his compass has gone. Knocking his lavalier mic out of his pocket. Okay, line that up with that now. And that is virtually spot on, is that. The compass is pointing that way, north, and my little gauge is pointing that way. So I could walk along with this in this area 5 days before, 5 days afterwards, and all I'd have to do is pop that in the ground, say to myself, right, it's 12 o'clock. How many degrees has the sun moved from 9 o'clock in 8 o'clock, 7 o'clock in the morning when it came up? Add those degrees together and then line that up with, say, in theory, if it's 12 o'clock, it should be 180 degrees. So I'd line that up with my shadow, put it through the centre, and I'd be saying to myself, right, okay, this way's north. And it's pretty accurate. Accurate enough if you're just trying to walk out of somewhere and get back to civilization. Now, the one thing I haven't mentioned about water is urine. Urine is 95% water, but unfortunately it's the 5% that isn't water that you don't want inside you. And the condition of the water gets worse the older it is. So don't wait until you've run out of water and you've been dry for 2 days and you think, well, that's it, I'll have to drink my own urine. If you know you're probably going to be in a tricky situation, while you've got some water, mix the urine with it and use it then to try and eke out your water supplies. But when that urine starts coming out a really disgusting colour, your body ain't going to thank you for putting it in there. Need them boots, you see. I was on that earlier. She was full of sand now. Well, there we are, back at, what shall we call it, the tree still. And it's just been a couple of hours since I left it here, so I'm not expecting anything too much. The other problem is that when you're doing this, ideally you want a bag, preferably one about the size of what a new mattress would come in, because I was using a sheet and it's been almost impossible to seal it up completely so that the water doesn't evaporate out. Anyway, we've had a couple of hours and we haven't got a load of water sitting in the bottom, but we've got enough to show that the principle works. I'll bring the camera in closer and you can have a look. I can see here the moisture starting to form. Let's have a look around here. Maybe some bigger drops here. There we go, you can see the droplets of water, and eventually they'd become big enough to start running down into the bottom. So we've seen the principle works, but we'd only be doing it if we were sat around for days with nothing better to do, just to try and add the odd cup of water into our stores. Now, I say the odd cup of water. I've actually done this for real in my back garden one summer day when it was about 30 degrees. I left it for about 4 hours to 5 hours with a big bag, and I got about half a cup of water. So, based on the principle that I need at least 4.5 litres a day in the desert, we need to get some more water. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a walk back to that palm tree we had a look at and get a coconut and see if we can find some water in that. Yeah, this could be another fail as well. Wait and see. I am now definitely tired. I lost my sunglasses, and I'll tell you something about following tracks. When I stop, well, I've had to track back about a quarter of a mile, and I remember this little bit here. So I've just spotted something in the dune. Let's see if we can get up here. I reckon another 10-15 minutes and them sunglasses would have been gone for good. To be honest, I'm surprised I've found them. That wasn't in the plan for the video. Tell you what I'm going to do, I'm going to put them in my rucksack. So here we are at the end of our trip. Just a couple of things to do before I hopefully get a drink out of here. If we are going to move around and leave our known location, try to leave some sort of trail markers. In this case, this wouldn't work, but I put an arrow in the sand, and if this was on firm ground, not sand, it would stay there forever. So at least somebody knows which way you've headed off. And if possible, leave a little note. Obviously, in the terrain we've been in, you're not going to be able to do that because it'll be covered within minutes. But anyway you can find, you might be a bit of bush like this. Leave a bit of fabric on it, anything to indicate you've been there. So, I got to the palm tree. Right, and I'm very thirsty. Let's see if there's anything in here without chopping my fingers off, which is the thing I'm always worried about. Oh, well, there's definitely some liquid in because there's some pressure there. Let's have a look. Yes. Now I've never done that before, so I wasn't sure what to expect. But if Bear Grylls can keep putting creepy crawly nasties in his mouth, a little bit of this isn't going to do me any harm. It's watery, which it would be, but in the sense that it's thicker than water, but not so thick that it's uncomfortable to drink. I'm going to bring it over to the camera and put my knife there so I don't lose it. And just let you have a look. There you go, if you can see the water coming out of there. cut this open and you can have a look at the meat inside. Tell you what. Keep the knife away from my body. Oh, it's quite hard. Just trying to get a chunk out for you to have a look at. Yeah. So as you can see, it's quite a thick shell, and this is okay to eat. Mouthful of sand. Yeah. You can tell it's just starting to change into coconut flavour. But as it is, it's a bit like eating damp cardboard. So, I think I got more sand than I did. So, due to the fact that a few hours ago I was eating egg on toast, I'll pass on that. But yeah, it's possible. Very chewy. Very difficult to digest, I would imagine. Right. I'm just going to finish off with one little story. I mentioned the tracker I spent some time with in the Namib Desert, and one of the stories he told me was when they had to go out and search for a couple who got lost. They'd driven into the Namib Desert, parked their car and decided to go for a walk in the dunes. Now you've seen how quickly, with a bit of a breeze, my tracks can be covered up. So they went for a walk for about an hour and then realised they'd become disorientated and they couldn't find their way back. And in the distance they saw a oryx, and there's also certain types of gazelle that also live in the same environment, and they don't need to drink water. Well, this couple assumed that if they followed the oryx, it would lead them to water or safety. Now, an oryx, sometimes known as a gemsbok, don't need to drink. They can get all the moisture they need to survive just from nibbling on plants, trees, like these acacia trees, which I've just learned how to pronounce properly. So what the oryx does is it heads for safety and goes deeper into the dunes, and this couple followed this and they almost died because of that. So don't rely on following animal tracks to take you to safety, because that may not be the case. Well, with that little story, I'm going to wrap up. We'll go back to the UK and I'll run through everything we've talked about, correct all my mistakes in the debrief. So if I have made any errors, we'll have that at the end of the video, and we'll see you then.
Well, here we are, back safely in the UK, doing the debrief. Now the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put my glasses on, because I've made some notes. I don't normally talk from notes, but I've made some notes to make sure that I don't forget anything. So I pop them on. Does it make me look more educated? Yeah, maybe not. Okay. So the first thing that I want to point out is you will have noticed all the heavy breathing. Now this is not me trying to train to be a pervert or something. This is the lavalier mic. It's so sensitive, and without it you won't be able to hear a word I said because of the wind, as you'll have noticed from the very first clip in the video. But unfortunately it makes me sound as though I'm about to gasp my last breath and die. Not the case. Now something else I'd like to point out is that I'm not an expert on this subject. I'm an enthusiastic amateur, and I do know a little bit more about the subject than I put out in the video, but if I'd put all that in we would have been going for hours and hours and hours, and I think by then you're just sick of the sight of me. But needless to say, there are experts out there who know a lot about this subject and would be able to give you a lot more information. So if you're interested in certain aspects of it, just look it up on the internet, read some books. It's all out there somewhere, and as I do sometimes, go on some courses. One of the things that I will say is that a lot of the things you read about trying, like the collecting water, is not as easy as people would make it out. A lot of these survival things work, but only in the correct situation. I watched a video a few years ago about some survivalists. They took 7 or 8 of the most renowned survivalists in the world and did a documentary how they sent them out using ancient tools and techniques to survive. Well, if I remember rightly, they spent the first 3 or 4 days next to a river full of fish and failed to catch any. So these things, if you go out there to try it for real, are never as easy as they make out on some of these videos you might see. And I'm no different. What I was trying to do was immerse myself in the idea of being in the desert and see how it felt and how I would react in a real situation. There was one important thing I should have mentioned, and that was that in the equipment that you carry in your vehicle, always make sure you have a couple of pumps for pumping air into your tyres. One of the easiest ways to get out of sand initially is drop the air pressure in your tyres. Let them almost down. It increases the footprint of the tyre, and 50% of the time you'll find it works and you can get out, but of course then you've got to be able to pump the tyre back up. So 2 pumps just in case one fails, and always make sure you check them both before you set off. Now the next thing is the Arab clothing. That wasn't put on as a gimmick, and I can confirm that by the fact that after I'd done the shot with the smog on and the tobe, I had intended to take them off to make movement a little bit easier up and down the sand dunes, but I found that they worked better than I expected. With those on, I was actually cooler, and at the end of the day, on the walk back, after I'd finished filming, I decided to take them off, and I noticed the difference in the temperature and how hot I got straight away. So yeah, the emphasis I made about wearing the correct clothing, that was a good choice for that day in them conditions. Now, we talked about simulating being in the Sahara. Just interestingly enough, all that sand that I was wandering around in did actually come from the Sahara. It's blown on the winds and it gets dumped there, and you will notice if the wind's blowing from the south on certain conditions, you'll find sand all over your cars back in the UK. Sand from the Sahara. One of the problems with these winds was they were stronger than you could see. I wanted to do some shots from the top of some of those high sand dunes with the desert in the background. Every time I set my camera up, it blew over. Now, I don't have expensive tripods to keep the weight down when I'm in my when they're in my rucksack. You tend to use very cheap and nasty ones that are made of lightweight plastic. Well, the tripod I was using on that particular day, I did have two fortunately, but the one I started to use initially, it kept blowing over, so I dug the legs into the sand and the wind just simply snapped one of the legs off, so that was useless. So I had no choice but to try and shelter between the dunes to do virtually all the video. Now, I did mention this was a mistake about the Great Sand Sea in Libya, and I've never been there, but I've read quite a lot about it, and after I'd done the video I realised that I'd said the wrong thing. I referred to it as running east-west, west-east. The dunes actually run more north, north-northeast, down to south and south-southwest. So the opposite to what I was telling you. Another case probably of Clarky getting the map the wrong way around. But I had realised that, but decided I'd correct it now. In a situation where you were having to cross the dunes at 90 degrees, it'd probably be more advisable to do it in late afternoon, early evening and early morning into middle morning when you had some visibility, because it's very difficult to, as I showed you, to go straight up and straight down. So you may want to plot a course but then veer left and right to take the easiest way up the dunes. So maybe not the ideal terrain to be traversing at night in the dark. I did at one point mention 3 stars and then later 2 stars from the pointer stars from Orion's belt. That's a common mistake by me, simply because you may notice from the picture that you can only see 2 stars clearly. There are 3, but generally speaking it's 2 that you can see, so force of habit, looking up and going, oh yeah, there's the 2 stars. There is actually 3, but 2 of them are clear and the other one can be quite indistinct. Now, I used the term nebula when I was talking about a dark patch on the Milky Way, and I did say that I didn't know what it meant, and I hate not knowing things about what I'm talking about. So let me just read an extract from Wikipedia. A nebula, cloud or fog in Latin, is a distinct luminescent part of interstellar medium which can consist of ionized neutral or molecular hydrogen and also cosmic dust. Yeah, I think that's enough information. We'll leave it at that. It's a dust cloud. When I was showing you my method of navigating, I'd actually taken a small part of the method used by the Bagnall compass. Now, the Bagnall compass, if you have a look at this guidebook that I'm just putting up on the screen, this book explains to you how to use a Bagnall compass, which is a total waste of time because you won't find one anywhere. They were made in limited numbers in the war for the Long Range Desert Group and special forces like the SAS to navigate through the desert, simply because their normal compasses would not work when they were moving in their vehicles, which not only were made of steel, they were also completely covered in armaments, machine guns and everything, and so the compass was badly affected. So the guy Bagnall came up with this sun compass, and it relies on having all the correct data for the azimuth, the direction of where the sun is at the different times, at the different latitudes, and it would require changing every 15 to 30 minutes and rechecking and resetting. I took a small part of that and was using that as my method of navigating using the sun. Now, since I finished filming this, I heard a report on the news that books written by the likes of Roald Dahl, children's books, they're going to take some of the words out and change them because it's not considered politically correct nowadays for children to be reading those particular words. Well, I guess I'm going to have to apologise then, because I used the word fat, and apparently that's one of the words that's been taken out. Well, to any of you short fat banking clerks out there, I apologise. I'll try not to do it again. And finally, if you have wandered out into the desert without water and you come across a coconut full of it, when you've finished showing it to the camera and demonstrating that it is drinkable, don't tip it into the sand ready to move on to the next shot where you cut it to pieces. Drink the bloody stuff. Unlike me, who finished that particular aspect of the video and suddenly thought, I'm thirsty, I forgot to bring some water with me. I've just tipped about half a pint of it into the sand. So, maybe I'm not as bright as I thought. Well, with that, I think I've covered everything that I wanted to come back to. So I'll say that's it for now. I'm not sure when the next video will be. It'll be when I suddenly have an idea that I want to pass on to you. So thanks for watching, and I've noticed at the end of all these YouTube videos, people always say, oh, click subscribe. You don't have to. If you're interested, you'll find it later. If you don't, you won't. So cheers for now.